everyone. Welcome to Resistance Live. It is the 17th of October, 2024. Today, we're going to talk about Kamala Harris's incredible appearance last night on Fox and the allegations that Trump has engaged in election interference, again with Stormy Daniels, in advance of another presidential election while waiting sentencing on 34 felonies from whence he did the same thing, and the fiasco on Univision last night, and a whole bunch of other stuff. I have a long list today. So welcome. I'm ECM. For those of you who are new here, and I know we always have some, I'm a former Wall Street trial lawyer, lifelong activist, and 15-year consultant and coach on political and leadership, political strategy and leadership. So welcome. I'm glad you're here. All right. So first things first, Kamala Harris went to enemy territory last night and did an interview with Bret Baier on Fox News, where she was profoundly tough. And I said yesterday when we knew that this was coming that I really did not expect that we were going to have any problems with the interview on Fox News. But I think that actually one of the things that was the most effective about this was her calling out Bret Baier's editing of Trump's comments in real time and really showing no fear. There was no fear. There was no cowering in the face of disinformation. There was no falling off her game or getting confused. It was very direct, very tough, and it showed what Kamala Harris brings to the table when confronted with people who are difficult, don't like her. I had a moment last night while I was watching the clips of it where I thought, if this is what she's like in a room with people like Viktor Orban and Vladimir Putin, we have nothing to worry about. And I think that it showed the Fox News viewers a version of Kamala Harris, the real Kamala Harris, that's very different from what they have been told by Fox News and what they have been told by Trump. I'm going to remind you all, Trump is referring to her as a lion, a communist, weak, pathetic, right? And she was everything besides that last night on Fox. So it was a real win. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I think it's going to sway a huge number of votes because all they're getting 24/7 from Fox is propaganda and edited clips of Trump. But at the same time, I do think it's important that she did it. And I think that one of the most important moments of the night was when he said to her, how would you refer to Trump supporters? Do you think they're stupid? And she wouldn't take that bait. She said something, and I'm paraphrasing here, along the lines of, I would never say something like that. I would never demean my fellow Americans in that way, unlike Donald Trump, right? And I think that it was a moment where she truly demonstrated that she was prepared to be the president for all people and not just a few. And that is also a very significant difference between her and Donald Trump. So win-win. I feel very good about it. All right. We had breaking news last night on the Chris Hayes show on All In. From Rachel Maddow, who appeared on the show specifically to break this news. And this, my friends, is a hell of a thing, all right? Because Rachel Maddow got some information, leaked is kind of not the right word. She, as a journalist, was provided with information from Stormy Daniels and her lawyer about an effort by Trump and his legal team to silence Stormy Daniels yet again in advance of this election. So let me just lay the groundwork here because there was some confusion here about this on our Patreon feed this morning. Reminder, if you want to become ask me questions, you can become a paid subscriber over at patreon.com/resistancelive, and I will answer them on the air. One of the things that people didn't seem to understand was how it is that Stormy Daniels ended up owing Donald Trump money. So we have to go way back to get to the beginning of this, to a character you all may remember by the name of Michael Avenatti. When he was representing Stormy Daniels, he initiated a defamation suit against Donald Trump without Stormy's permission. And that defamation suit was found to be meritless. And as a result of, and she didn't want it filed, and she was very angry with him for filing it. It was one of the things that led to her firing Michael Avenatti before he was arrested for trying to extort Nike, and also then for stealing from her because he stole a part of her book advance. Long story short, when the defamation case was dismissed, Donald Trump filed for legal fees related to that. And Stormy was on the hook for $500,000 in legal fees as a result. Now, a few months back, Rachel Maddow interviewed Stormy Daniels. And one of the things that happened in that interview was that we learned that Trump's attorneys were trying to go after private and personal information about Stormy Daniels' daughter because Stormy was too broke to pay off the legal fees. And the end result of that was that Stormy Daniels got a lot of traffic to a GoFundMe page where she raised way more than the amount that she needed to pay off Donald Trump. So as a result, she and her attorney had negotiations with Trump and his attorneys about resolving the judgment that had been entered against her. And ordinarily, when you resolve a judgment, one of the things that attaches to the judgment is interest. And so there's a back and forth that goes on between lawyers when this is being resolved. Like, what's the actual amount of interest that we owe you? Well, in that context, and like not only is there videotape of this, but there's also like emails that Rachel Maddow put on the air last night on Chris Hayes. Donald Trump's lawyer said, we think we can, the interest is like $635,000 or something like that. But for 620, she can get out of this if she signs an NDA saying that she will never say anything about Donald Trump again, and this is the really critically important part, that she will never claim that he is unfit for office, for the office of the presidency. All right. It's that last bit that raises all sorts of questions in my mind as a lawyer, and particularly as a New York lawyer, about all of this. All right. And I'll tell you why. Because a standard NDA contains a non-disparagement clause. And often when you're settling a matter or you're resolving a case, the parties do sign, non-disparagement clauses that say things like, I will take this money in settlement of this suit, and I also agree that I will not disparage the other party. I will not make adverse statements about them. All right. But this goes beyond that, because what he was trying to get her to do was say, I'm never going to again claim that you're unfit for the office of the presidency. Okay. And of course, Stormy Daniels flipped him the bird on this and said, no way. And eventually they resolved it for $635,000. All right. Straight out of that GoFundMe that all of us contributed to. I know so many in this audience did. So, the thing about this, of course, is that what he was just convicted of in May for 34 felonies on which he is awaiting sentencing was a scheme to launder payoffs to Stormy Daniels to try to silence her in advance of the 2016 election. So I have to ask you how stupid you must be to be somebody who is out on, ROR, released on your own recognizance, following a criminal conviction, awaiting sentencing for a hush money scheme, okay, to then try to perpetrate the exact same scheme through your attorney. Except this time you're trying to launder the money through a court judgment. It's like, woo, oh my goodness. And, one of the things that I want people to consider here is that in the state of New York, right, because this was one of the underlying felonies that made the fraudulent documents claims felonies in the case in which he was convicted, it is a violation of law to engage in a conspiracy to try to get somebody unlawfully elected or stop them from being lawfully elected through certain unlawful means. At the bare minimum, there's an argument to be made here that this was an attempted conspiracy to interfere with the election. All right. May only be a misdemeanor, but that's not actually the best part of this. And this is where I really want you to think for a second. All right. Because one of the things that judges can consider when they are considering how to sentence somebody who's convicted of a crime is the likelihood of that person to commit crimes again. Recidivism, in other words. You can go Google it. It's like a fancy legal word, but essentially what it means is that it's a propensity to commit additional crimes after you've already been convicted of them. All right. So here, now, and Rachel called Alvin Bragg's office and asked for a comment on this, and they said no comment. All right. But now we have a very interesting set of facts heading into his sentencing at the end of November, because what this demonstrates is not just like a possibility of recidivism, but actually a propensity toward it. Like he's already trying to commit the same crime. All right. And that in and of itself does not bode well for Donald Trump not doing jail time. All right. I got to just point it out to you all. Judge Merchan, I've already said this. I thought Judge Merchan was going to sentence him to prison time from the beginning, like immediately after the conviction. I thought it was possible. All right. I've been saying it here since like the end of May when the conviction dropped. Okay. The real key now, though, is that I can guarantee you that Alvin Bragg is going to submit as a part of his sentencing memoranda or a supplement to his sentencing memoranda the facts concerning this particular set of circumstances. Because what it does is it gives Judge Merchan further fuel to sentence him to a significant prison term and maybe more than what like a lot of us have predicted. I've long said, you know, the penalty for each one of those 34 felonies is anything from probation to 4 years. I've long said that I thought 4 years served served at the same time for all 34 counts was perfectly likely. All right. And there's a lot of precedent for this. Chris Hayes pointed this out last night as well, that there is a lot of precedential case law where people who were convicted of this particular set of crimes did go to jail. All right. For me, I will tell you that if I were the defense attorneys in Donald Trump's criminal case, I would be extremely concerned about what Maddow broke last night. Because essentially what it does is it gives Judge Merchan ammunition to go above and beyond what he might have already been considering in terms of prison time. Maybe consecutive sentences instead of sentences that are served simultaneously, meaning like 4 years for the first count, 4 years for the second count, 4 years for the third count. I don't think it's going to go that way because I don't think he's going to end up serving 134 years in prison. But I'll tell you, I think it is a strong argument to go to make sure, okay, that there is enough of a punishment here to deter Donald Trump from trying something like this or committing other crimes again. All right. So this is going to be fairly wild. And I will also just say one other thing for all the other attorneys in the audience, because I know we always have a few. Don't engage in conspiracies to violate election law with your clients, because you yourself will get disbarred. And that may be coming down the pike for his attorneys in the defamation case. Just saying. All right. In addition to that, as if that wasn't bad enough, Donald Trump did an absolute dumpster fire of a town hall last night on Univision. I have to say that the questions on the Univision town hall were actually really quite good. Perhaps the most significant and important questions that I've seen asked of Trump in any town hall. It felt like a very honest, frankly, town hall in a lot of ways. There were people who got up and said, I used to be a Republican. I'm not now. I was very upset by January 6th. You know, I was very upset by what you did to Vice President Pence. You know, tell me how are you going to not do that again, basically? And Trump said January 6th was a day of love. He was asked all sorts of questions. How are you going to replace, if you round up and deport all these undocumented people, how are you going to replace all that labor? Where are we going to get our food? What's our food going to cost? And he went off on a huge tangent about, you know, allegedly murdering and you know, released from insane asylum, millions of people coming across the border, kind of nonsense, and never actually answered the question. So there were some very significant questions last night. I will also say that it was really nice to see questions being asked in Spanish because, frankly, you know, this is Univision. They have a multicultural, multilingual audience, and it was really important to see both sides of that. Trump himself was clearly very frustrated with questions not being asked in English at every moment, even though they were all translated. So you should go look at the clips, because it's like, as with every single event that Donald Trump has engaged in the last, like, let's just say 5 days, it was sheer madness, just absolute malignant narcissist in complete collapse madness. And everybody can see it. I mean, if you look at the facial expressions of the people who were inside that town hall last night, they're already being memed. And, you know, this was supposed to be an audience that was allegedly friendly to him, and it certainly did not turn out that way. So yes. So go find the Univision town hall. Please watch it. And, you know, or at least watch the clips, many of which have already been repurposed by the Kamala HQ account on Threads. You can go check it out. All right. Okay. We have a lot to talk about today. Okay. So we had two rulings from Judge Chutkan in the January 6th prosecution in the District Court for the District of Columbia in the last 24 hours. One of them denied Donald Trump's request for additional discovery. This was no surprise. It was essentially a fishing expedition by his legal team to try to get information about like the alleged Russia hoax and, like whether or not there had been foreign influence to benefit other candidates like Joe Biden. Really kind of garbage nonsense that Chuck essentially was like, get out of here with this. Get out of here with this. But in addition to that, she is supposed to be releasing today, by ruling, the appendix to the brief that Jack Smith filed back on the 1st of October. You all remember that Trump had until the 10th to object to this. He filed a one-page objection that was essentially like, this whole thing is ridiculous, which is not what you're supposed to do. And today's the day she's supposed to release the appendix, okay, by order, all right? We're all waiting for it because we all want to see like, some of the additional citations. Some of it will be redacted, but we want to see the additional citations here, okay? And we want to see like who they came from and maybe who the new witnesses are if they're released, all right? There's a lot of people waiting anxiously for this. This morning... This is going to fail, so don't freak out, all right? This morning, Trump filed a brief on the day that this is supposed to be released, asking for a delay until the 14th of November, all right? It's not going to happen. It's an absolutely frivolous motion. There's no basis in law for it, and Judge Chutkan is kind of done with Trump's lawyers' nonsense. Like, she's actually said this in rulings in the last week and a half, like, cut the BS out, basically. So I'm not actually that worried about it, all right? I do think we're going to get the appendixes. They might be like delayed by a day or two because she wants to cross every I and dot every T, so to speak. I mixed my metaphor, but there you go. And I will tell you that she's not going to grant it because, okay, I have these moments in the comments. This is why. Okay, I'm just going to say this before I get distracted. I'm going to remind you all that the comments, the live stream comments here on YouTube are going to paid members of the YouTube channel only on Monday. All right. So if you want to comment on the live stream, not the comments below after the fact, but on the live stream, while I'm live, you're going to have to be a paid member of YouTube, all right? And that means clicking the join button below or the $ and subscribing as a Resistance Live channel member. It's like $4.99 a month, okay? But this is one of the reasons why I'm doing it, because there are people here who make comments, some of whom are trolls, some of whom are ridiculous, that make comments that are just out of left field and are distracting and annoying to me. And we need to get those people off the feed, all right? So, she's not being threatened, okay? And if she is being threatened, people have already been arrested and prosecuted for threatening her, all right? She's not going to grant anything because Donald Trump asked for it. Do you know this judge? Have you seen this judge in operation? I used to practice in that court, okay? This is not a judge to be trifled with. And she has already warned Trump's legal team that if they continue to file frivolous motions, like sanctions were coming. So no one should be bothered by this, all right? And also, I just have to say one other thing. Stop undermining the judicial system when it's actually working. Because our judicial system in Judge Chutkan's courtroom, at least, is functioning very efficiently. Like, since that case came back down to her from the Supreme Court, it's been, like, on. And, we're going to get a trial date, probably in early 2025. So, once again, I want to make sure that everybody kind of, like, stays focused here. I have to remind you all, because the comments are floating by on this, the broadcast is still going to be free. You're still going to be able to watch it and get all this valuable information. The only thing you're not going to be able to do if you're not a channel subscriber is comment during the live stream, okay? So the broadcast isn't going anywhere. Please stop complaining. It's free, okay? You're going to be able to get all this information. The only thing that I am doing is restricting comments so that trolls and like troublemakers are not disrupting the broadcast and interfering with our incredibly valuable audience, all right? And if you don't see a join button, you need to go to YouTube on a desktop or a laptop or after the broadcast and look for it on my channel, okay? All right, I'm going to do my best to not get annoyed because I'm a little annoyed. This is one of the reasons why I'm like moving to this format. And I'm not alone in this. Like most of the political channels at this point limit comments in the live stream to paid members, all right? So don't complain because you're still going to get everything that you want. You're just not going to be able to comment on the live stream. But you can comment after the fact below. Like comments below will be open once the live stream is over because we have strict content moderation through YouTube on that. All right. Let's talk for a second about one other thing that directly relates to what's happening on Univision and what happened at the Economic Club of Chicago and what happened in his incredible like live concerts the other night. Donald Trump has pulled out of yet another interview. He was supposed to be interviewed by NBC News for another last final days of the campaign kind of interview, and he pulled out this morning. All right. I have to say again, and I'll link to it up here once the broadcast is over. But I talked yesterday about the fact that it seems to me to be very apparent now that his entire campaign staff know that his mind is gone and that he can't handle a live inquiry kind of situation, and that every single time he is put under the gun by a qualified interviewer and on a format where he's not being like wildly edited to sound coherent like Fox News, he's not able to actually form a coherent sentence or answer questions. And so the withdrawal from NBC comes after he withdrew from CNBC, which was considered a friendly outlet, after his withdrawal from the 60 Minutes interview that has been done for 50 years for every single presidential candidate in the final month of the election. Again, I just have to say that that all of this is an indication, as I said yesterday, that the campaign and the backers of the campaign are aware that his mind is gone. And if you want to hear me talk about what happens in the event of a President Vance, you have to go watch yesterday's video, okay? And I'm not going to scare anybody, but it's yet another reason why you've got to stay as focused as possible on telling everybody you know to go vote. Go vote. Vote blue up and down the ticket. Vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. Make sure that you are not neglecting your local and state elections, because that's who decides if your vote gets counted, all right? It's so important that we do everything that we can to make sure that we are preventing the possibility of either Trump or Vance ascending to the presidency, because Vance is actually in many ways a lot scarier because he's a true fascist and he's controllable. All right. They're not hiding his dimension now. How do you think they're going to hide it for 19 days? Have you watched him in the last 5 days, even just like a 10-second clip? Come on. All they're trying to do is stop the bleeding. All right. Okay. So let's see. Had a lot of questions on the Patreon feed lately about how to cope with the stress of this moment. And I just want to take a minute to remind you all that, we're not ever effective activists, mobilizers, organizers if we are constantly in fight or flight mode. All right. And we've talked a lot about polls here in the last few weeks and how polling isn't reliable. I talked about this yesterday also about the GOP seeding the information space with GOP funded polls and how that's designed to make it look like the race is neck and neck, so that when Trump loses, assuming we do the work and everybody gets out to vote, he can claim that, the polls were so close and now he's lost by a certain number of votes, and how that's clearly a sign that the election was interfered with. That's part of the long game here. All right. And I know it's really hard to deal with. I know that the stress of this moment is really hard to deal with. I just want to remind you all that we have this program coming in November, assuming that we win after the election, that we're calling the Transition Team. And it is going to be a program that is designed to help us move through both political and personal trauma so that we can actually do all the good work for the nation that's going to need to be done once Kamala Harris wins. So there's going to be a lot more coming on this soon. We all have to get between now and November 5th and when the election is called. All right. But if you want to join the interest list for this, there's a link right below this video. All right. So you can join the interest list and you'll know a lot more about this after the election and when we open registration and all of that. So help is coming. Help is coming, in other words. And I do want to remind you all, if you have lost family members to Trumpism, if you've lost friends to Trumpism, if you have lost faith in humanity or our institutions or your ability to trust people, all of that is very common in this era. So is walking around feeling afraid that everything's going to fall apart, that the other shoe's going to drop and all of a sudden you're going to be living in a fascist nation. Totally understandable. You're not alone. All right. So just please know this, that's one of the things this community has been built on in the 8 years that we've been here, is providing a space where we're conspiracy zone free. And we're also here to support one another through the struggles of this time. But we're going to do a really formal program on it starting in November. And I really hope you get in on that below. It's just an interest list, just to let you know some things about what's coming and let you know when registration opens. All right. Okay. We had some really big, great news out of Georgia again. Okay. So you'll remember there was one really good decision out of Georgia. I think it was Monday or Tuesday. Yesterday, we had another big win. Thank you, Mark Elias and the ACLU. This one was about new rules that the Georgia Board of Elections, which was already like, we already had that ruling on like hand counts of ballots earlier in the week that, I nearly knocked something off my desk, now we've had a ruling, a similarly excellent ruling that in essence is designed to stop the Georgia Board of Elections from putting into place arbitrary rules that they don't have the authority to put into place that will interfere with the election results in Georgia being certified. So this is the second huge victory in Georgia. And I'm going to remind you all, as we talked about yesterday, the early voting numbers in Georgia since early voting opened on Tuesday are enormous. Like Georgia almost tripled on the first day of voting, the turnout as compared to 2020. So Georgia, I have a lot of hope in Georgia right now, and a lot of faith. All right. And we're seeing enormous turnout by Black women, by white women. Hopefully, I have to say this every time. My fellow white women frighten me because 53% of us went in favor of Donald Trump in 2016. I'm hopeful that we are really in Rocktober heading into November where we're going to pull it out. All right. But I have to say this, the turnout numbers are really solid right now. And if Georgia flips, and again, it's been pretty blue for the last 2 years. We have John Ossoff, we have Raphael Warnock. I'll remind you, Raphael Warnock won the runoff the day before January 6, 2021. There's been movement in that direction, thanks to Stacey Abrams and others, for a very long time. But we need Georgia. And I have to remind you all also that Georgia is the only state where the GOP is in charge of how votes will be certified, the only swing state where the GOP is in charge of how votes will be certified. And so we really need these rulings in Georgia, and it's very, very good news. Okay, I'm going to say one final thing to you guys today because there are some fear mongers running around out there right now on mainstream media and on social media. People who are telling you that you need to freak out right now because there's so much violence coming after the election. All right. And I have to say, I find it, you all know this if you've been here with me for quite some time, you know that I find this not just amoral, but also often disturbing because it's done for profit or attention. Okay. So I'm going to remind you all, as I did yesterday, that this is not 2021. Okay. It's not 2020. Okay. Joe Biden is in charge of the executive branch. Right? We have a functioning Department of Homeland Security that has all sorts of election protection facilities, including a cybersecurity division that works to protect the sanctity of our elections. Okay. Joe Biden is the commander in chief of our military, including the National Guard. And while it's not impossible that there may be some lone wolf violence around the election, the idea that we're going to have another round of January 6th, I think is very far-fetched. And I will tell you that, at least from my old contacts in DC, you all know I went to law school there. I practiced there for 4 years. I did a lot of conjunction work with the Hill and law enforcement. Folks are very well prepared for this. And I'm going to say, even in these swing states, I'll remind you all, in the days before Fani Willis dropped her indictment, they had the Georgia FBI and the Fulton County Sheriff closing down the courthouse and keeping her staff at home to make sure that in the event that there was any violence directed there, everyone involved in prosecuting Donald Trump would be safe. That's Georgia. Okay. So the idea that we are in for something even worse than January 6th this time around, I personally think is fear mongering. Again, I will not debate that there may be lone wolf violence. There may be fake bomb scares called in to a random voting location. That kind of thing is possible. In fact, I would say that I wouldn't be surprised if we got some of those fake bomb scares. Okay. And at the same time, we have an incredible facility in this country right now under the control of Democrats to make sure that this election is safe and protected. So please just take a breath. And I'm going to say this, even when you see someone on, let's just say hypothetically, a late night MSNBC talk show who is claiming that horrible things are going to happen. Okay. I'm going to remind you also that even from a legal perspective, the Harris campaign has hired Mark Elias. They have 10 times the number of lawyers working for them that Joe Biden had working for him in 2020. Okay. They're winning everything in advance of the election that they are filing in court to try to protect the election results. Everything. They haven't lost a single case. So everyone needs to just take some deep breaths and also remind yourselves of one thing. Okay. mainstream journalism right now, including journalism on our side of the fence and including commentators here on YouTube, function by creating outrage for clicks. So you need to ask yourself like legitimate questions about whether or not the things that you are seeing and reading and listening to are things that, first of all, you actually need to worry about, but second of all, whether or not you can control. Okay? Because the things that we can control between now and November 5th is a limited universe of stuff, but it's the whole end game, right? We can control whether or not we vote. We can control whether or not people in our community know how to vote and know how to get to the polls and have a plan to vote. We can control whether or not people know that they're registered or are registered if we're not beyond a deadline yet. We can control whether or not we drive people to the polls for early voting. We can control whether or not we're out there canvassing and door knocking and text banking and phone banking. Those are things that we can control. And honestly, that's the whole outcome of the election. Like, it's in our power, all right? And I'm going to say one other thing. Whatever they pull, because, you know, Donald Trump's going to pull some stuff. You know that. Like, we can all see it coming from a mile away. He's going to claim the election is stolen when he loses, right? And he's going to try every little nonsense thing. Millions of undocumented immigrants were registered to vote in Arizona. It's all Kamala Harris's fault, right? We're going to hear all that stuff, okay? We're going to hear that, like, you know, oh, I found out that dead people voted in Georgia, because he tried that before too, all right? He's going to try all of that stuff. But if we win, not just by a little bit, but by a landslide, none of that will stick. It's not going to stick anyway, but it's going to be like a much stronger case to make it not stick if, like, you know, Kamala Harris has 330 electoral college votes. So just do me a favor, okay? Everybody take a deep breath. And I've said this here before. If it is troubling you, if it is raising your blood pressure, if it is putting you into a fight or flight response, please turn it off. Don't watch it. That includes me. Like I've said this before. If you don't want to watch me for the next 19 days and you want to focus instead on talking to everybody in your community about getting out the vote, go do that. Like, that's the right thing to do if I'm freaking you out. But, you know, I show up here every day to talk everybody off a ledge. So hopefully I'm not doing that for you. But seriously, don't watch the mainstream news if it's freaking you out. Don't watch commentators here on YouTube who are like creating insane thumbnails and headlines that are designed to scare you. Don't watch those people. You can come back to them after the election, but they're doing it all for ad revenue. And that's not really moral, right? Like, I'm here to tell you guys the truth and talk you off the ledge because I feel an ethical responsibility to this audience, let alone after 8 years, okay? So do the work. Turn off the stuff that is freaking you out, all right? And if you're struggling with trauma, please get yourself on the mailing list, the email list for our new program, The Transition Team, that's going to come up in November, all right? Like, the link is right below in the box below this broadcast, all right? And don't forget to like, to subscribe to this channel, which is all free, right? Drop me a comment if you're watching after the fact. In fact, if you drop me a comment that says program, I will make sure that somebody on my staff comes through and gives you a direct link to get on that list if you can't find it. All right. So drop program into the comments below. And please also just remember that, like, this 19-day run from here on out will be stressful. And it's normal to be worried in advance of a presidential election, let alone one that is of this much significance. But there's a difference between worry and panic, all right? I'm worried, which is why I'm doing the work, right? It's why I show up here 6 days a week, because I want our democracy to survive and thrive and become everything that it has never been able to become, all right? Of course I'm worried. Am I panicked and freaked out? Am I listening to commentators and people on, like, MSNBC who are, like, raising my blood pressure when I listen to them? I'm like, why are you doing that? No, I'm not watching those people anymore. Like, I'm not. I just am like, no. And I'll tell you one other thing. I'm sure as heck not watching the white guys on YouTube who are scaring the shit out of everybody. Okay? I would recommend that you don't either. All right. I will catch you all here tomorrow at the absolute latest. I am going to remind you all that there is some good breaking news today, by the way, that I forgot to mention before now, which is that Joe Biden has once again released a whole bunch of public servants from their student loans, has forgiven, once again, millions and millions of dollars for another tranche of student loan holders today, which is huge. All right. So we have a lot more coming up, a lot more rallies, a lot more good stuff coming from Harris Walls. And we'll have lots more to talk about on that in the coming days. So I'll see you all here tomorrow, later on today, if there's a need for an emergency broadcast. Mad grateful for all of our longtime subscribers here, for our Patreon subscribers, for people who have joined the channel because you want to stay in the live chat starting Monday. So grateful for all of you. And I wish you all a wonderful Thursday, and I will see you all here soon. All right. Take care, everybody. Bye.